Hi there, listener, and welcome to the fifth in our series of podcasts about the best snow sports equipment for winter 2025. In our first four episodes, we looked at the best skis, the best ski boots, the best jackets, and the best goggles and helmets. And today we're going to look at two essential items for every skier and snowboarder, and that's because we all like to keep warm on the mountain. Today, we are going to be discussing how to keep our hands and feet toasty with the best gloves and socks available for this winter. Now, before we start, I'd like to put a shout out for Ellis Brigham. This special episode of the Ski Podcast has been made possible by them. Ellis Brigham are the winter sports specialists, and they have 16 shops around the UK where you can buy all the kit you need for this winter. Alternatively, simply go to their website at ellis-brigham.com and you can buy online now. Now, my name's Ian Martin, and I am joined today by my regular guest and equipment expert, Al Morgan. Hi, Al. How are you today?
Morning, Ian. I am very good, and I have a feeling we're probably going to talk about snow. I'm in London, and yesterday I was loading my van to go somewhere and got snowed on. It was amazing. I was very happy.
It's brilliant. Well, actually, earlier, I'm sealed off from the outside world at the moment, but here in Brighton, it was snowing earlier today. And while that's great that it's snowing in the UK, the really exciting news is there's a lot of snow coming down in the Alps.
Yeah.
Probably been about 50 centimetres so far. And I think we're in the middle of a snowstorm with probably another 50, maybe 70 more in a lot of the main alpine resorts to come. So I've been looking at the webcams. I wouldn't say non-stop, but as I'm going to be there in 2 weeks' time, I'm very excited about it.
Where are you going?
I am going initially to Courchevel and Mirabel, so I'll be in the Three Valleys. I will be
Excellent.
in Courchevel for the reopening of the Celia cable car, which has been closed since 2021 due to an accident that they had there. So that will be very exciting. And if I'm lucky, we'll be on the first ascent of that cable car on Friday, the 6th of December. So keeping my fingers crossed, and listeners, you'll obviously hear about that in future episodes. But today's subject, we're looking at how to keep yourself warm in the winter, and it's a very important part of it. It's very hard to enjoy skiing if you're feeling really cold, and so your hands and your feet are really important. So I thought to start off with, as we have done in these equipment episodes, we start off with a little bit of advice and kind of general chat. And let's start off with a bit of advice that I know you like to give people, and I'm wondering how this is going to work in respect of gloves and socks. But try before you buy. Can you actually try socks before you buy them?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. So a classic example of when you can is if you're going to buy a boot, let's say, because when you get your ski boot fitted, it's really important the sock that you're wearing. So if you got fitted and you just had a demo sock on in a shop, for example, just a fitting sock, and it was really thick, and then you got home and your socks are much thinner, the boot would feel markedly different. So one of the best things when you go to buy a boot is talk to the staff about the kind of sock that's going to work for your foot, your skiing, and what you want to do with your skiing. And then you can get those socks then. So you are going to try them on. Can you go on a rack and, you would pull off a jacket, try that on, pull off a glove, try them. You can't do that with socks, obviously. Some shops may have try-ons. There's the whole hygiene thing around it, especially post-pandemic when people are a bit more cautious. But yeah, you cannot sometimes try them on.
Yeah, but with gloves, evidently that's different. So if you're trying a pair of gloves on, there's certain things that you want to be thinking about beyond just whether you can fit your hand in it, right?
Yeah, and well, that is the first one. Can you get I bought my daughter a new pair of ski gloves yesterday, and just trying to see the shape of them. I have because I know her hand size. I know how she fits in my gloves, so then I have to try their glove and get a comparison if she's not with me. So that's the first one. You try your hand in. How does it feel? If it feels really, really baggy, you've got really floppy fingers, it's way too big. But a note of caution there. Conversely, if you get a glove and you're, brilliant, it's all around my fingers, right at the fingertips, go and grab a ski pole. Some shops will have a fake, short ski pole handle for you to grab beside the gloves, purely for that reason, because when you wrap your hand around something, the glove gets pulled further down the fingers. So if the glove is really snug when your hand is pretty straight in its normal relaxed position, when you wrap around the grip of a pole, the glove can be too tight. And if it's pushing against your finger ends, that's cold fingers.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing you need to be able to make sure is that you're going to be able to undo or do up boot buckles as well? Because if like the fingers are so stiff that you can't move them, then that's going to be no good to you.
Yeah, and some leathers will be stiffer when they're new, and some gloves break in even after just a couple of wears. Some as you use them over time, and often those gloves last really well. But yeah, that sensitivity, if you're going to be operating a camera when you've got little dials and buttons and things, or you want to use a touch screen, having a glove that is really gives you that massive dexterity and sensitivity is important. You might lose a little bit of warmth. That's kind of one caveat there. But go and grab a boot off the shelf. Go and see if you can adjust that. Go and play with a helmet. Go and do what it is that's going to be essential for you to do with gloves on. It's not that weird in a ski shop to be doing
that. Cool. Okay. Well, let's talk about gloves first. So before we go into your choice of products for this year, I thought it'd be useful just to cover a few of the terms that you're going to use in there. And I guess the first one is we're talking about gloves, but we also have mitts. And sometimes even the kind of stranger sounding word or phrase, lobster claw.
Yeah.
What's the difference between
those? So a glove is, as you'd imagine, it goes around your thumb and then it's got an individual pocket for each finger. And the reason I'm going to be a little bit pedantic on that is this pocket where you can use each finger independently, because you do get mitts mitts are where all four of your fingers, not your thumb, is in a kind of sleeping bag cocoon together. But some of those have finger separators inside. So even though each finger has a pocket, you can't use those fingers independently. They have a whole wrap around them. So a glove is very dexterous. You get fantastic mobility and control of things. But because you don't have the same blood supply to your middle ring and little finger as you do your thumb and actually your index finger, they can get cold really quickly. So that's why a mitt is really good. You keep everything nice and warm together. Then you get the hybrid, which is what we call 3-finger or a lobster claw. So you have your thumb in its normal separate pocket, as you do with pretty much all gloves and mitts, and then your index finger is in its own pocket. Now the blood supply to those two digits is different to the other fingers, and that is why they do not get as cold. So you can have those in that separate pocket, so you get the best of both worlds, in that the fingers that generally get cold are kept warmer because they're together, and then you get that bit more sensitivity, bit more control and dexterity. So especially if you're going to be climbing or mountaineering where you want to hold the head of an ice axe, when you generally have your index finger in front of the shaft when you're holding it and your thumb around it, and then the other fingers behind it when you're holding it from above, kind of just holding a shovel handle if you want, that can be really, really good. But it's that blend of warmth and dexterity why they can be a real benefit.
Okay, and another thing that you mentioned, I mean, excuse me, you mentioned gloves for your daughter. You said you knew her size.
Yeah.
In terms of sizes, I'm guessing kind of small, medium, large are fairly obvious, but there sometimes are specific sizes in numbers for gloves. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you get small, medium, large, let's say you only have 3 size ranges in a glove, that's got to accommodate a lot of different hand shapes and sizes in each of those 3 units. So the classic way of gloves is that they're in a number. So whether that's 6, 6.5, you might get a size 4 for a child. I'm classically an 8 and 8.5. And really what that's talking about, or the easy way to look at this, if you get I'm going to hold it up. So if anybody's watching this, I've got a tailor's tape measure. And for those listening, just a soft fabric tape measure, you wrap that around the widest part of your hand, just by the bottom of your fingers. And the measurement, that circumference of your hand, will be in inches, and that pretty much directly relates to the size of the glove. So I'm about just over 8 inches around there, around just below my fingers, and I'm a size 8 or 8.5 in gloves.
Okay, excellent. Now, size evidently incredibly important. We talked about what's right for you for your fingers, for keeping everything warm. But something that I think everybody needs these days, gloves that work on a touch screen, so you can check your carve stats or your Strava stats or ski tracks or whatever it is that you're using.
Yeah.
Is that standard with gloves these days, or is that only with the better models?
No, neither of those things actually. It's not standard, and a lot of upper end gloves, very warm gloves, especially those that maybe are built by companies that also make mountaineering clothing, won't be touchscreen, because you're not going to be using a touchscreen at -20. You're really not going to be bothered about using a touchscreen at that temperature. But yeah, the North Face classically do it on a lot of theirs, even some lower priced things. I have a pair of Columbia gloves here that I've been testing. I haven't actually finished testing yet, and that's got touchscreen, and that's not the upper price point. So you get them at all different price points. It depends what the manufacturer is trying to achieve with that product. Sometimes the outer glove won't have a touchscreen or a tip, or what we call an E-tip, but it might have a liner glove that you pull out that has it. So that's another great way of, if you need to use a touchscreen, having an inner glove in your main warm unit. Take that out, use the touchscreen, your hands aren't getting really cold, then put it back in the big outer glove anyway. Because fingers on normal ski gloves are quite big, actually, how much control do you get? It isn't very sensitive.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because you kind of anticipated one of my other questions there. So liner gloves, or liners, let's say.
Yeah.
You're saying that this is something like a thin glove that you would wear inside your regular glove, right?
Absolutely. Now, some brands will do a model that has that comes with it, and often you'll just buy that liner glove separately. And I actually have liner gloves. They're not E-tips, but and then what's great is I can use it for running. So often I'll go training in the evening in a resort or something, and having that, because you don't want a big warm ski glove or mitt on anyway. So that's really good. But especially, if you're going to be ski touring, using cameras, fiddling with kids kit, maybe you need to get kids boots done up and the buckles are a bit small, and having that liner glove so your hands aren't getting frigidly cold when they're out of the main ski glove or mitt is a really good way to do it. Just a note of caution: if you have a normal glove, a normal ski glove, and that fits you really well, and you think, oh, I want to make it warm, I'm going to put a liner glove in it. If, like the ski sock, if it's too thick, you think it's going to be warm, that's going to compress your hand more, and actually you could end up with cold hands rather than warmer hands.
Yeah, and so that's something that you might wear inside the glove. But also sometimes we talk about like a shell mitt that might go on the outside of the glove if you're in particularly bad conditions.
Yeah, there aren't loads of these, but there are a few brands that use them. I typically carry it's actually mildly insulated, but a shell mitt in my bag. So if somebody gets a really wet ski glove, or the weather really turns nasty, or you have a broken bit of kit and it's going to take you longer to get out, you're not going to be as warm, shoving that mitt over that glove, even if your ski glove is wet and you shove that shell glove over the top of it, it's amazing how much warmer it makes everything, because it's keeping the wind away from where the water is. So you're not getting that, the wind pulling the water off and cooling the hand more. Yeah, it's just a really good get out of jail free card. They're really light. They're generally pretty cheap as well to buy.
Yeah. And one small point, we were talking about this in the green room earlier. I never knew this before. On on my gloves, there's like a little strip of fabric across the back of one finger on
Yeah,
each glove.
yeah.
And I've always wondered, what on earth is that for? And you have the answer, right?
Yeah, many people don't know this. And then when I chat to them, they go, really? So essentially it comes from, imagine a world of climbing, yeah, and you're on a rock face or whatever, and you need to do something a bit more fiddly, but you don't want your gloves to fill with snow. You're hanging there. So it's a clip loop. So you get a carabiner, you clip through that loop on the finger on each glove, and you can hang them on your harness so that opening of the glove is pointing down towards the ground. They don't fill with snow. Are people going to faff around with that? Actually, it's really, really useful. They may not have somewhere on the waist to clip it, but what I sometimes see is people will take their gloves off and shove them fingers first into a pocket and leave their gloves there, so the opening's out. What I always do is turn my gloves so the opening is down and shove on my thigh pocket on my trousers. I shove the gloves into the thigh pocket so the fingers are sticking up, so the glove doesn't get filled with snow.
There you go. If you've learned anything from this podcast, listener, there's a single great piece of advice from Al there. Now let's touch on sustainability before we get onto the gloves themselves. I think, if anyone's listening to this, chances are they've listened to some of our other episodes already. And we've seen similar trends in sustainability across, skis, ski boots, jackets, etc. But do you want to just give us a quick brief on what's happening in the world of sustainability around gloves?
Yeah, so a lot of, as absolutely correct, as you say, a lot of recycled materials, just less harmful or polluting ways of making these products. So perfluorocarbon free treatments for the durable water repellent coating, that DWR coating. there's a lot in insulation. What's brilliant is lots and lots of brands are very quickly adopted using recycled materials. It's generally made with polyester and some other materials for synthetics, and it's quite easy to make those out of recycled materials, which is fantastic. But sustainable materials, wool, there's boiled wool has been a very traditional way of making gloves. I used to climb in boiled wool mitts when I was much younger. I'm quite old. And it's amazing how it keeps the weather off, keeps you warm, even when they're wet. And that material is being used in some gloves. But wool is really sustainable. It's fantastic. Shave it off the animal. It regrows. You can use it in the product, and you can reuse it. So you can pull out of one product, use it in another as well.
And I think I read as well in the world of socks, Smartwool have actually started an initiative where they're collecting old socks and reclaiming the yarn from them.
Yeah, exactly. So often with products, things are just chipped down and then they can't really be used in the same format. But so Smartwool have collection bins in I actually know they've got one in an Ellis Brigham store in Covent Garden because I've been there and put socks in it. So yeah, it's slightly different in North America. They've been doing it longer, so the system for reclaiming the products from those socks is a bit more thorough. They can then reuse those yarns more to make a sock, as you may imagine. And then in the UK, that process is relatively new. So we're getting into the flow of things whereby they can take those socks in, split them into component parts as you might want, and then use materials from them, which is brilliant. And I've actually got socks made from Smartwool that are made of these recycled products, and they're fantastic.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's take a look at the best gloves for 2025 then. We've got a mix of adult and kids gloves in your selection. And I should probably point out that we don't actually have any specific snowboarding gloves on this list. If that's what you're looking for, I recommend that you head to Ellis Brigham's sister company, the Snowboard Asylum, and I'll put a link to the show notes in there. So let's start off right with the best possible gloves you can spend if money is no object.
Yeah, and actually, if I can kind of just sidestep, sorry, and I know I sometimes do this and I apologize. So with snowboard gloves, often people will be dragging their hands on the floor. So lots of ski gloves will be seamed at the end of the finger. So you imagine dragging that on the snow, then that seam can get damaged and pull apart. So actually a lot of snowboard products, and you see this in more and more ski products now as well, the protective cover on the end of glove will wrap right around the finger end. So actually, it may be a ski glove, but it could work really, really well for snowboarding as well, and vice versa. So yeah, into the gloves list. So we're going to start at upper end, and I mean upper end. This is £300 for a glove. But if you have a circulatory disorder, or you really, really struggle with the cold and you want to be in the mountains, having an electronically heated glove or mitt is the ultimate answer. You can get down mitts, they are brilliant, but you have to be generating the heat yourself to keep the hand warm. With a circulatory issue, that may not be the case. So a heated glove where you're applying external heat to your hand is amazing. So Thermic is kind of one of the main brands for this. So the Thermic Heat Boost gloves, they do men's, they do women's. You can actually get mitts as well. Has the little lithium-ion battery pack in a wrist pocket, a button on the back of the glove so you can control the heat with different settings. Generally, it's 3 settings. Yeah. Once you try this, it is incredible. I mean, the glove has Primaloft in it. You've got leather palms. It's got the normal features you'd expect of a really good quality ski glove. Nice long gauntlet cuff. So, you know, you can have this over your jacket. Think of a knight in armor going into battle with like gauntlet. That's where the term comes from. So it keeps all the snow out, but it's the warmth. If you're going to run it on maximum power all day, it wouldn't last a full day skiing. But if you're going to run it on its lowest setting, it's amazing how long it lasts. And actually in testing, I found I don't have it on all the time because it is so good. And they talk about heating the fingers. I think the heating is it's amazing how you feel it around your whole hand. So they're doing a new free ride glove, which is all leather, which is fantastic. But this heat boost is very soft, so comfy and really warm.
And how does the heat control work then? Is it like a Bluetooth thing, or is there a control on the glove that you press to?
Yeah, there's a little rubberized button. They'll probably cringe because rubber's a specific thing. It might be made of a slightly different material, but it feels like a rubber button on the back of the hand. So on the back of your palm, and you press it press and hold it to turn it on, tap it to change the setting, press and hold it to turn it off, and it has a light on it, so it's telling you what setting you're on. And just USB rechargeable batteries that are in the cuff. You do notice the batteries a bit. They're not particularly bulky. It's not a problem. You can notice them. You cannot feel the heating elements around your hand, apart from the warmth. It's not like you feel a big cable running down the back of your fingers or anything. It's not like that. The tech is much more advanced, but the warmth is phenomenal.
Okay, well, if you're prepared to pay anything to have warm hands, then that's an option for you. Just going down slightly, then there are also other very good gloves available. What's next on your list?
Yeah, so it's it's £140 less, £160. So we had this conversation last year, and we spoke about a Hestra glove, Army Leather Gore-Tex, which is still around, and it is a brilliant glove. It's slightly more expensive than this. So this has just knocked it off its perch. You get a few more features. You have a nice soft snot wipe or nose wipe, convenience wipe, whatever you want to call it, on the back of the thumb. It's got a really long cuff, a really long gauntlet cuff on it. Keeps the weather out. It is phenomenally warm. It's the Black Diamond Guide Gore-Tex glove. They do amazing gloves. I use their Sparks a lot, which are about £100, a lot less. But if you want the ultimate in warmth, but aren't going to, don't want to spend that £300 on a heated and still want the dexterity of a glove, the Black Diamond Guide is phenomenal. And that uses that wool inside, that boiled wool tech that I spoke of. Uses that on the palmer side, keeps you warm. Still has Primaloft gold in it. You've got nice fleece leather inside. And of course, because it's a Gore-Tex glove, it is fully waterproof. And probably a thing that's worth noting about this waterproof insert that we call it. It's called an insert because it's not like a jacket where all the things are glued together and then they're stitched into the design. There's so many seams in a glove, it wouldn't be breathable because you have too much tape. So it's a Gore-Tex liner made in the shape of a hand, and that slides inside. Sometimes it can be attached to the outer, sometimes not. And that's one of the annoyances, especially on cheaper gloves, when you pull your hand out and the whole inside turns inside out. But it's because it's an insert, so we call it a waterproof insert.
Yeah, well, I'll have to check, but I'm pretty sure that I have a pair of these gloves, or certainly an older model of them, and I love them. I love that gauntlet style, the wool on the inside. And I have Reynards, and after an incident in Zermatt, when I was up on the mountain one time, I was doing quite a lot of filming. I was just like taking my gloves off the whole time, and they got so cold. It was awful. I ended up going into one of the mountain restaurants, I think at Riffelalp, and I had this extraordinary pain through my fingers.
It's incredible, isn't
afterwards, it? as they came back to life. So since then, I've been wearing those. Yeah, I would recommend these gloves. Okay, more towards the mid-range then. What's next on your list?
Yeah, so £40 less, £120. So this is from Hestra. So I mentioned the Army Leather. So Hestra's ski gloves, often they'll just have a label on it saying Alpine Pro. But then they'll have a little badge telling you the model name. So this is called the Fall line. And actually, I'm looking at the women's one. They do a mitt, they do a 3-finger, that lobster paw, but this is the glove, and they are beautifully soft. The leather on it is fantastic. This lovely grey fleecy lining inside. They give great warmth, and because the leather is really supple, you get a brilliant sensitivity of touch with it, even though it is so warm. It's a neater undercuff design. You get a little carabiner with it, but it doesn't have a clip on the back of the finger. It has a clip on the wrist, so don't go clipping them fingers down. They'll just fill with snow. But if you're just about town, it's not snowing, it's quite handy. Yeah, it is leather. It's water repellent. It doesn't have, as the last one we spoke about, having a Gore-Tex insert to keep you dry. Same with the thermic glove that's got that waterproofing in it. This doesn't. It's the leather that keeps the weather out. So if you're going to go out when it's sodden wet, yes, water will get through, but the leather is treated, and Hestra do a really good little tin of glove balm. So if you're going to buy a glove like this, invest in that. I think it's about £10 for the glove balm. It will help keep the leather soft and supple, especially if it's getting wet and dry cycles when leather can crack. And it helps improve the water repellency over time as well. Yeah, the Fall line, and the women's white one looks amazing.
Oh, and that's £120, and I think you said it's available depending on your preference as a mitt or a lobster claw.
Yeah, men's and women's as well, and different colours.
So that was £120. Then coming in at around £100, we've got a more traditional type of glove, I think.
Yeah, so Reusch has been around for a long time. People may know it. They make some amazing race gloves. And this glove, the Storm Artex XT men's, often people just call it the Artex. The Artex XT is the waterproof membrane they use in it. It has a bit of a racing look to it. It's got some padding on the back of the hand, but not full-on knuckle protection as you would get on a race glove. It's £100. It's really pretty warm. It's got that R-Loft insulation. It's available in a whole range of different colors. I really like the blue effect on it. It's black and blue. Yeah, breathable membrane in it. It's just it's quite a traditional looking glove. I think it looks really nice. It gives good hand protection, good warmth, and you get that breathable, waterproof weather protection. But short cuff again. It's not a really long gauntlet cuff like that Black Diamond.
Yeah. Okay. So that was £100, and then I'm not saying that this is necessarily, a lead-in price for gloves, but 75. If you're going to spend money looking after your, making sure that your hands are dry and warm during the winter, but you still want to be able to make sure that it does work. What can you offer at a kind of entry level?
Yeah. So actually, I'm talking about two gloves in this. The one that I've chosen is from Salomon. It's a propeller Gore-Tex. So this is £75. You get a leather palm. It's funny, it's got finger protection on the inner side, the palmar side of the first two fingers. I'm not too sure why you'd need that protection, but it feels kind of luxury with it. But yeah, good insulation, has their own insulation, but it has that Gore-Tex waterproofing. You have a leather palm. That's £75. That's a really good price. Again, it's a neat little undercuff. It looks brilliantly. Just looks brilliant and neat, as has that clean aesthetic. They actually do one called the Propeller One, which is £20 less at £55. So if you don't want leather, the Propeller One is a good option. The reason why I've selected the Propeller Gore-Tex is because you get Gore-Tex and you get leather at a brilliant price. But the Propeller One uses Salomon's own waterproof, breathable membrane tech. It's the same insulation as the Gore-Tex version, but it uses a faux leather. Basically, if you want, it's just the synthetic palm that looks like leather. So if you want to avoid that material, that's a good option, but it's a bit cheaper at £55. That Propeller One.
Okay, and then you've also added a pair of children's kids gloves onto the list as well.
Yeah, and we don't do loads of kids glove, but this is £45, and I've looked at lots of different kids gloves, and you can spend a lot of money on kids gloves. And I urge anybody that is going with your kids, please just spend as much time and consideration on their gloves. A lot of kids' gloves can be a bit too cold. So whether you're going to get a mitt or whether you're going to get a warm glove like this is from the North Face. It's a major brand. You think it's going to be expensive. It's £45. They make an adults Montana for men and women, but this is the kids Montana. Has a really lovely little loop by the wrist. So pulling the gloves on is very easy. You've got a draw cord around the wrist. It's got quite a big cuff, so you can seal the weather out, seal it around their jacket. It uses North Face's dry vent waterproof breathable insert. It uses the heat seeker insulation. It's got E-tip functionality, so if the kids are going to be videoing themselves or their friends or you as you fall, which normally happens in our family, then this glove just allows them to do all of those things. And I know you're going to not want your kids to be on the phones on the hill, but actually lots of kids like to shoot videos of themselves skiing. It makes them feel good. It's just a lot of fun. You get a lot of glove for your money at £45. It's a North Face Montana kids ski glove.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising, so that's really interesting. A couple of points that you raise there. I guess, firstly, the idea that you don't want your kids to be on their phones on the hill. That's more like a broader philosophical question. But I think in general, when you're doing an outdoor kind of sport like skiing, they are going to spend less time on their phones. But
which is lovely.
My son and his mates, when we go away, they spend most of their time in the park, and they're always looking to try and get the best footage that they can use. So those E-tips on those gloves are really important. But something else you said then, you said that kids' gloves are often leave their hands too cold. Why
yeah, I've bought loads of different gloves for my kids over the years, and some of them you go, God, they're really good. Kids' hand is. The surface area is much proportionately larger than on an adult's hand, so they're going to get cold. My daughter's hands get really, really cold, so she'll often just be in a mix. It's warmer. And my son's now the size where he can use my gloves, and it's amazing, actually, me sometimes using what were his gloves, and I'm going, God, they're much colder than the adult gloves. And unless you're in a process of going back-to-back tests, you don't necessarily notice it, but kids' gloves are cheaper. If you're going to spend £150 on an adult's glove, you would hope it's going to be really waterproof, really warm, has really good sensitivity. Are you going to spend that much money on a kid's glove? I think most people wouldn't. So often there is a compromise. There are some amazing kids gloves. This is not a generalization, but just put the consideration into their wee little hands as well, so they stay warm.
Okay, well, that was the North Face Montana kids ski gloves. Are coming in at £45. Let's have a listen to Ellis Brigham's choice for gloves. These are sent in by Harry. What do you think of that, Al?
You know what? I love hearing their choices because they see all the products that they've got in store. And although we're talking about various different products and Brigham stock all these things that we're talking about, they have a different slant and they talk to a lot of customers. So it's really interesting feedback.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to socks then. Again, like we did with gloves, we're just going to discuss a couple of the terms that might crop up when we talk about them. Let's start with one of your hated terms, a relic of the 80s, I think. Where do you stand on tube socks, Al?
Yeah, just don't stand on, in, or around tube socks. Our foot isn't a straight tube. So yeah, a tube sock is made in a long, think of it like a sausage skin if you want, but really thick and knitted out of synthetics or wool. But our ankle's bent. So once you bend this tube sock, it folds around the top of the ankle, around the instep. And that's where your blood supply to your foot is. So you're only going to get cold. Get a sock that is shaped like your foot. Don't be confused. So if you go onto some brands' website, Stance, for example, a lot of their socks just look really straight on their website. I think they're not great images of them, but they're not tube socks. They're anatomical. So just because it may look straight, read the tech about the sock, but get something that is shaped like a foot, ankle, and leg.
Okay, that makes sense. And those are anatomical socks, most of which we're discussing. What about if you're a snowboarder? Do you need to track down snowboard-specific socks?
I'm going to sound a bit like a politician, I suppose. Yes and no. So you can use a ski sock for snowboarding and you can use a snowboard sock for skiing. And I do both sports and I've done both of those things many times. But there can be specific differences in that. If you think of the strap on a snowboard binding above the boot, holding you down into the back of the binding, when you crank that up, sometimes it can be beneficial to have padding. So some will have padding under that area of the foot. So it can be slightly different.
Cool. Okay, I have to apologise to listeners that possibly I've got some scaffolding being taken down outside, and they've literally just started.
I didn't hear it.
That might. Good. Well, okay. Hopefully that won't affect things. Anyway, here's a simple question for you, Al. Are thicker socks going to help keep your feet warmer?
That is a brilliant question. Should we say the phrase "fit is king" again? So if you need a sock that works with the ski boot that you are in. So but my own ski boots for regular alpine skiing are really snug. Not quite race boot, but really snug. If I put a thick sock in that, it's going to compress my foot more and I get colder. So no, a thicker sock will not make you warmer. A sock that fits you well is made of quality materials and allows a blood flow into your foot. You are going to be much warmer. You can get a really, really thin sock, almost like a liner sock. It has no padding in it, but it can be warm. But that is designed to be in a very snug boot. So no, thick doesn't mean warm. And whatever you do, don't go, I'm cold, I'm going to put 2 pairs of socks on, because there's so many problems with that.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, it's interesting what you say about thinner socks. I've got a couple of pairs of Stance socks, a brand that you mentioned earlier. And when I first got them, I was really surprised because they are, to my mind, very thin. But so far, they've worked really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Other brands do them. I've got Smartwool, thin Smartwool socks. Some of them I've had for decades and it's going really well. And if that fits me well in the boot, I can be much warmer than if I put a thicker sock on.
Okay, and we hear a lot about merino wool in socks. Is it inherently better to have natural rather than synthetic fibres?
There are a few benefits, not least it doesn't stink as much. So it naturally inhibits the development. I think it naturally inhibits the development of the bacteria that causes the odor in socks. So you can have a merino wool sock that will, you can wear, because lots of people take 2 or 3 pairs of socks in a week. So you might be doing 1, 2, or even 3 days in a sock. Please avoid doing 5 days. The socks are not great at the end of it and the comfort is compromised. But it always has to be mixed with materials. Synthetic materials wick and breathe really, really well. a merino wool sock, that wool content can help with the insulation. Depends how things are mixed in. But if you had a pure wool, it wouldn't last very long and it wouldn't hold its shape very well. So it has to be blended, mixed in with other materials. And some people don't like wool or allergic to it, don't get on with it. So then a pure synthetic sock makes a lot of sense for them.
Okay, well, there's evidently a lot more that we could talk about, but I think we should move on to the products themselves. So I think you've selected 4 for the best ski socks for 2025. And again, top of the list, the most expensive one is what you would probably invest in if you really, really, really want to keep your feet warm.
Yeah, and they are really, really, really good and warm. They are nearly as expensive as the gloves. They are £280, but this is with the battery pack. If you're going to buy the sock on its own, let's say you have the battery pack already, the sock's £90 for a pair. So it fits like a regular ski sock. You know, so the brand, again, Thermic, these are power socks. They do various different heated socks, but the power sock set, the cable runs down the back. It's in this nice flat panel. It doesn't run directly down the back of your leg. They've positioned it so you're not going to get that rubbing irritation in a ski boot. It's in a part that doesn't get lots of pressure. And if you're going to buy this, they do different batteries, but the 1400 Bluetooth battery is the top end. You get longer run time, so you can have hotter feet for longer. And the BT, it's Bluetooth controlled, so there's an app on your phone, and you can on the battery itself, you can control it that way, but you get much more control if you do it via the phone. You can see the battery life. You've got much more sensitive control of the heat. It's a really good system. You're not having to bend down, do your boots. But the £280, you get the whole thing, the 2 batteries, charger, the socks in there as well. And yes, you can wash the socks. I know some pro athletes that use heated socks because they'll be swapping between boots. So don't think this is only for people who wear it's ultimately about comfort and warmth and they're not bothered about skiing. If you are one of the world's best free ride or ski touring athletes and you're wearing these socks, they obviously work.
And also for, I was thinking more about slalom racers, those sort of people who are always on the first lift. Recently talking to the Carrick Smith boys, and I've interviewed Dave Riding before, when they're training in somewhere like Saas-Fee, they'll be going up on the lift at 5 in the morning and taking the first descents because they want to get that snow when it's really hard. In summer skiing, it can warm up quite quickly in the day, but when you first start your skiing at 6 or 7 in the morning, it is very, very cold.
Yeah,
It's
a good point. I don't know of any races that use a heated sock. Some will use heated footbed, so the bit that goes inside the ski boot that you stand on. So Thermic also make a system, and I've got it in my boots, where the element sits under your toes in the footbed. So then you can have a very thin sock on and have that warmth. So some will use that. Yeah, they're cold. Like when you're racing, sometimes they'll be standing their boots in the plastic to make them colder and stiffer. And whoa, they are hardy lot, the racers.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, most socks are nowhere near as expensive as that.
Yeah,
they are affordable.
This is a tenth of the price.
Yeah, they still might be expensive by some people's reckoning for a pair of socks, but it obviously depends what they give you. So what's next on your list?
Yeah, so £28. So it is 10% the cost of that Thermic sock. And this is my go-to. It's a Smartwool targeted cushion. They do a men's version, a women's version. So you get a little bit of padding down the shin, which is brilliant. You get padding through the toes and heel. And if that works in the ski boot that you're in, you don't get the rubbing. It's really soft on your shin. It's really, really nice. I find this actually works in very snug boots as well. They do a whole range of designs. So they do some block collars, which are quite traditional, or you get much more artistic creations on these socks, so they can look fantastic as well as performing brilliantly well. Smartwool is famed for their merino tech. I think they're actually the first brand to use merino certainly in ski socks, if not in regular socks. Smartwool targeted cushion. I love it. It's such a good sock.
Okay, and similar price range then. The next one on your list is the Sea-Dash Shore Fit sock.
Yeah, exactly. So the Smartwool socks I use aren't left and right foot specific. This one is left and right foot specific. So it's got padding unique to each area. If you look at your ankle, for example, your ankle bones aren't directly parallel and at the same height. So they can move where the padding is. Surefoot makes liners for ski boots. A lot of people's footbeds they have in their boots will be from Sea-Dash. They are a real technical company. And this SureFit sock, they do a comfort version, which is, I think it's actually the same price, but this is a bit more technical. Yes, you get shin padding, you got padding around the foot. It's anatomically brilliant, and it just skis really well. Mega comfy, a little bit less money than the Smartwool.
And your fourth choice is offering, well, I guess even better value than those above in terms of what you're getting for your money.
Yeah, and if somebody doesn't want to use something with animal products, so they don't want to use a wool, or they're allergic to it, or for whatever reason, and or if somebody doesn't have the budget, because ski socks can be, quite spendy, quite expensive. So Ellis Brigham do their own socks. This is their winter sports twin pack. It's £20. So for less than one of the others, you are getting 2 pairs of socks. Super comfy. You've still got very similar levels of padding in that sock, and it's all synthetic. They use Coolmax in it, so you're getting good breathability. Your foot's kept at a comfortable temperature. Yes, it's not going to feel as luxury as some of the 25, £30 socks, but it's still comfortable, and it's a fraction of the cost. You get 2 pairs. Arguably, if you're on a budget, that will do you a week.
Interestingly, from the Ellis Brigham point of view, Mark Brigham contacted me, and he sent in, too modest to select the Ellis Brigham two for £20, but exactly the same 3 socks that you selected in your pick there: the Thermic Power socks at the top of the range, Smartwool socks, and the Cedar SureFit ski sock. So you're clearly very well aligned there, Al.
Don't get me wrong. If you want a mega tight ski sock, get the thinner one from Smartwool. I've used that a lot. It's really, really good. And they do full cushions. For example, Cedar does their comfort socks. There's loads of variety out there. It will depend on the fit of your ski boot. But if Mark's, I know Mark, but if Mark's, and didn't talk to him about this, so this is interesting that he's chosen the same 3, because they are really good socks.
Cool. Okay. Well, just as a reminder, this special episode of the Ski Podcast has been made possible by Ellis Brigham. They are the winter sports specialists, and they have 16 shops around the UK where you can find all the kit you need for this winter. You can also buy online at ellis-brigham.com. Now, I enjoy all feedback about the show. I like to know what you think, especially about our features. And we've had quite a lot of feedback about these episodes and our episodes in general. You can send me your feedback by social at Ski Podcast or by email theskipodcast@gmail.com. Adam Matthews contacted me via Instagram. He said, "Love the podcast. Many thanks for all the content. I've especially enjoyed the episodes with Al about kits." Bo Spanding said, "Like the show on jackets," but he said he wanted to kind of point out when it comes to Gore-Tex, they only work if they're clean, so the pores are open. And then he also said the air outside the jacket is drier than the inside, so sweat won't escape if it's more humid outside, for example, in the rain. I wonder what you thought about that, Al.
I love this conversation, and he's raised some really interesting points. Absolutely clean the products, and I've seen various different research pieces from this, including from material scientists. So I would say, if you are going to wear your ski jacket for a week, when you come home, wash it and reproof it. The second bit's just as important with proper products. Don't just chuck it in with your normal laundry detergent, because that can actually block the pores, as he's referring to. Absolutely correct. The jacket has to allow water moisture to escape from the inside and stop water getting in from the outside. The bigger problem that a lot of people have is when you get a new coat, water hits it, beads up, runs off. Yeah, that's the durable water repellent coating. Works brilliant. It doesn't last very long, irrespective of what anybody says. You want to reproof it at least every week of use, really, if not more. And the reason you get wet on the inside is because it's the outside of the face fabric gets wetted out, so the garment can't breathe. So his point about the rain is partly right. It's not so much about, you can have a pretty dry day when it rains. The air isn't that damp. We're not talking monsoon season when you've got 100% humidity. But if the outside of the fabric gets wetted out, it can't breathe. You get just as wet on the inside. That's not the rain coming through. That's your sweat.
Yeah, okay, that is really interesting. And listener, I'd probably refer, if you haven't listened by chance to our ski jackets episode, listen to that, because we discuss all of this in a lot more detail on there. Colin contacted me on Twitter. He said, "The goggles and helmets episode was another great podcast. I use Zeiss anti-fog spray for my glasses to stop them fogging up while skiing." I wonder what you thought about that, Al.
Yeah, there are some really good treatments. There's one called Sparkle that I was using for a while, years ago. And actually, I had family members that would ski in prescription glasses, and they'd put this anti-fog treatment that you rub on and polish up on their glasses that they wore under their goggles, and it worked really well. There are different brands. I think Oakley does one. There are some others. So yeah, really good point. Really good suggestion.
Cool. Okay. Well, we're coming towards the close now. So if you like the podcast, listener, there are a couple of things that you can do to help us. You can review us on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a comment on Spotify, and all of these things help listeners find us. You can subscribe or follow us so you never miss an episode. You can just do that while you're listening now if you want to. Or if you want to, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the ski podcast. A couple of people have done that recently. I wanted to thank Andrew Brannan. He also said, through your podcast, I blagged the ski show ticket for my daughter who is studying in London. She met Dave Riding, our household hero. Unbelievable. Really can't thank you enough. It's a pleasure, Andrew. And Dave was brilliant. I think he signed autographs for absolutely everybody who wanted them. I saw a big queue of people waiting to see him. And Paul Bond also bought me a coffee. Thank you, Paul. He said, thanks to the helmets and goggles episode with Al's expert views, I went to Ellis Brigham. Good service. Got home to a comment of what more ski kit? I asked Paul, and he bought the Oakley Pro Minor goggles, which was one of Al's recommendations.
Yeah, that Line Minor Pro is brilliant. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
Okay, well, we now have 235 episodes to catch up with. And I can tell you, are you ready for this? 234 of those were listened to in the last week. So the only one that wasn't listened to is this one that I'm releasing now. Now, this does happen from time to time, and it probably means there's one listener out there who is binge listening to every single episode. So if that's you, listener, well done. And if it's not, well, there's so much to listen to in our back catalogue. You could just go to the skipodcast.com, search around the tags and categories, and you may not end up listening to every single episode, but you're bound to find something of interest to you. Now, you can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at Ski Podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank Ellis Brigham for sponsoring the show and thank Al for joining me today. Thank you very much, Al.
Oh, Ian, thank you. I love it. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Well, we'll be back together with our final equipment episode, this time focusing on ski touring, and that will be coming out in early January. But before then, listeners can look forward to episode 226 next Friday, when we'll be discussing Hokkaido in Japan and what it's like skiing down Mont Blanc. So until then, to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today, and until next time, goodbye.